Face Africa, Saturday on CNN.
Well, the mighty Mississippi isn't nearly as mighty as it used to be, as we hear from CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam. The river has dropped to record lows while other parts of the country are getting ready for too much water all at once.
That's right, Kim. Drought spreading across much of the U.S. as we speak. In fact, 55% of the contiguous U.S. under drought conditions. That serves about 130 million Americans, the largest population impacted by drought since 2016. And one area that's been hit particularly hard, the Midwest, as well as the mid-Mississippi River Valley. This picture speaks a million words, right? This is Tower Rock Formation. This is in the Mississippi River south of St. Louis. It's normally accessed by boat only, but because the river levels have been so low along the Mississippi River, people have been able to walk on dry land to access that rock formation. Incredible to see those before and after images. Now, there are currently 77 river gauges across the U.S. at or below their water threshold, but 40 of those river gauges lie along the Mississippi River. Don't believe me? Here is an example. Take the Mississippi River at Osceola in Arkansas. It is at record territory, negative 10.4 feet. That doesn't mean that the water is completely dried up in the river. It just means that based on historical averages, it's running about 10.4 feet below where it should be. And we're approaching record territory at the Mississippi River near Memphis, Tennessee as well, and it's projected to get lower. Climate Prediction Center calls for below average precipitation to continue over the Mississippi River Basin. And look at this, just incredible amounts of the state of Oklahoma and Arkansas under severe drought conditions as we speak. Some slight rain in the forecast, but not enough to put a dent in this expanding and ongoing drought. I wish we could take some of the rain that's falling across the Southwest. Today they have a level 3 out of 4 for the potential of flash flooding for places like southeastern California, as well as extreme western portions of Arizona. Also, flood watches in effect for portions of western Texas. You can see that surge of moisture, showers and thunderstorms continuing to impact this region. Locally, we could pick up 2 to 3 inches of additional rainfall, causing localized flash flooding. We'll keep a close eye on it, but in the meantime, Kim, back to you.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says it's devastating to see flood-ravaged areas of Melbourne. He visited the area earlier today, and his nation isn't alone. Floods from different weather systems are wreaking havoc around the world. CNN's Michael Holmes has more.
Almost as quickly as they came, the floods, at least in this part of Melbourne, have receded. Officials warn that in many parts of the Australian states of Victoria, New South Wales and Tasmania, floods are still a threat and at times even intensifying. But some residents have already returned home and the damage is widespread. What was at one point floating now haphazardly strewn around. A garbage can stuck in a tree. Mud is everywhere.
The cleanup is going to be huge, right? Just if you think about all of the branches and all of the garbage that is washed up and is up against fences now, it's going to be massive.
The daunting task of cleaning up also facing people on the Greek island of Crete, where flash flooding there has caused similar devastation, leaving a tangle of toppled cars and tree limbs.
Good grief.
In some places, the floods spilled over embankments like waterfalls. Witnesses say it was terrifying how quickly the water rushed in.
It all happened within seconds. We just barely managed to get everyone out when the water had reached up to their shoulders.
And while these floods may have surprised some residents in parts of Africa, especially during the rainy season, flooding is not uncommon. But what is shocking is the scale of some of the recent floods. Officials in Nigeria say the country is experiencing some of its worst floods in a decade, with around 90,000 homes partially or completely destroyed, and nearly 1.5 million people displaced because of them. In Chad, families are fleeing flooded cities, searching for drier ground. Many travelling on foot, carrying their possessions, forced to set up makeshift camps after their homes became unlivable. In Vietnam, social media users posted videos of motorcycles making their way through deep floodwaters in the city of Da Nang. Residents there saying they haven't seen flooding this bad in 30 years. water rising to as high as 1.5 meters within 5 to 10 minutes. Authorities there say cleanup has begun as floodwaters recede. Michael Holmes, CNN.
Well, that wraps this hour of CNN Newsroom. I'm Kim Brunhuber. For viewers in North America, New Day is next. For the rest of the world, it's Living Golf.
Doc.
To see these places that have been inundated by massive deluges like this, it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And I guess, from one perspective, I guess if you was a commercialized type person and you was into selling goods as far as, materials and wood and nails and all other types of substances like that, I guess from one perspective, it would, you know, from a productive perspective, I guess it'd be a good thing. But how much more can the earth take pertaining to straining its resources? We don't have just so many trees. We don't have just so many of this, so many of that. And regardless whether it be intense heat pertaining to droughts, as it was talking about a while ago, because the Mississippi River is down so low that they basically had to stop the barges, which is costing ain't no telling how much money, because we transport can't transport goods up and down the river like we should. And I guess whenever it reaches that level, the next alternative is probably trucking it or rail. I don't know. Just depends on which is available and which is probably more efficient. But to see Australia was the most amazing thing that I had looked at, because I remember 4 or 5 years ago or less, Australia was basically at a state of super record heat and droughts and fires breaking out everywhere. I mean, everywhere there was fires. And to see the weather patterns change from going from one extreme to another is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And to think that, like, Pakistan, they just recently got a big flood over in that area that destroyed over 1 million homes and affected over like 10 or 12 million people. To think that these events is all being stemmed from environmental crisisness pertaining to the heat that causes evaporation to go up, and with the heat being hotter than what it should be with all the gases, etc., going up into the atmosphere, now the moisture level goes higher and it builds up more moisture, and then whenever it does release it, it releases it all at once. We've seen the exact same thing over here in America, pertaining to these deluges. It just comes out of nowhere that can just inundate a whole area like Texas, Houston. I think Houston and Dallas, they've been flooded 3 or 4 different times. I know Louisiana, they've taken on big floods. Jackson, Mississippi, it, whenever the water gets this high right here, it contaminates everything. It just don't contaminate your home that you're living in. It contaminates everything. Any type of infrastructure that town may have pertaining to sewer, pertaining to water, pertaining to the stuff that that you really are wanting to keep it capped off to the degree that you don't want it to become contaminated. And you may be saying, why? What difference does that make? Well, it makes a difference towards all them different chemicals that's floating around, that now you have contaminated the very drinking water that you drink, and now people are exposed to those chemicals that's going to cause them to get sick. That's why. And it talks about this in the Bible, how that God will throw us off into a sick bed. And I still think that we was in a sick bed before COVID ever hit. COVID just made it escalate a little bit more to the top. It kind of, I don't know, it brought a lot of attention in the medical society to the point of looking at people's health. But I think that we was already a sick society way before COVID ever hit, pertaining to cancer and other types of malnutrition diseases, as well as AIDS and tuberculosis, and I could go on and on and on with different diseases. But this don't help, is the point that I'm trying to make. And if anything, this will exacerbate the problem to where people will even have more problems. It's just amazing what's going on right now pertaining to some areas that are entirely too dry, like the Colorado River, the Mead Lake over where the Hoover Dam is. They're saying that probably within a year or so, if things don't change, they're probably going to have to literally shut down the dam because the turbines ain't going to have enough water to turn. That generates electricity. You got 25 million people over in Mexico that rely upon a water system over there, and it's drying up to the point that they're already on a tier one or possibly even a tier two by now, towards people being extremely cautious with water. So we're seeing places on the earth that are extremely dry, including and I forgot the name of the river now, over in Germany. They've just got through receiving a heck of a drought. China just got through receiving a heck of a drought pertaining to their agriculture this year. All these things that are happening strains the resources. It not only strains the resources, but it also hurts, if not ruins, people's lives, because I'm pretty sure in places like Africa, uh, they probably don't have an insurance um, standard over there like they do in some countries, like over here in America. And I'm pretty sure, all them people that got flooded out in Pakistan, they're going to have to start all over again. Well, where's their resources going to come from? Where's their wood? Where's their brick? Where's their copper for wiring? Where's their PCV pipe for plumbing? Where's all this stuff going to come from? It's going to have to come from the earth. Well, if you already have almost right around 8 billion people on the planet, and now suddenly you're straining all these resources because they're either being burned up or being flooded up, you got a problem. You got a serious problem. Plus, you got people that's steadily getting sick. There ain't no telling how many people in Texas and Louisiana in the past 5 years has been getting sick because of black mold and different contaminants that they have been exposed to just within the past 5 years. There ain't no telling how many different types of viruses that are spreading down there in leaps and bounds towards making people sick. It ain't no telling. Stuff that they didn't have to contend with, but now since they went through the flooding that they've went through, same thing up here in Waverly, Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. They just went through their year anniversary pertaining to what went on over there. Um, Eastern Kentucky, they've received flooding this year that basically devastated about 10 different counties. You don't think that whenever things like that occur, that it puts a whole different array of problems in people's lives? Sure it does. Sure it does. Regardless whether it's the drinking water or the air that you're having to breathe because you thought that you had your house dried out good enough, but the black mold starts building up, and the next thing you know, you got bronchitis, breathing problems going on. One thing exacerbates another thing that is not good whenever you're dealing with 8 billion people on the planet. So, is global warming real? Absolutely 100%. are the carbon emissions going up into the atmosphere that's affecting the atmosphere. Absolutely 100%. But also all these gizmos and gadgets that we're building that creates this artificial heat is adding to the problem. And also by draining the precious resources out of the earth is also adding to the problem as far as the heat being generated out of the earth that's now expanding. We live on a very, very thin skin, kind of like an orange. And the things that we do below our feet eventually will have a profound effect upon to what the next generation and the generation beyond that generation is going to have to deal with. And these are things that obviously got looked over 30, 40 plus years ago that now we're realizing, oh my God, this stuff is really, really real. Oh, yes, it is. They tried to warn us years ago that it was happening. But the oil company industries, the petroleum company industries kept telling everybody, oh, it ain't so, it ain't so, it ain't so. Why? Why was they telling us that? Because they was making profit off of digging in the ground and selling everybody crude oil. It was counterproductive to them towards getting in behind the fact that we are destroying ourselves by draining all the resources out of the ground and plus all the carbons going up into the atmosphere. It was counterproductive to them to say, well, maybe we need to reach for some other kind of alternative fuel source, like either solar or battery or wind or other types of different types of energy sources. They didn't want to do that. Why? Because it would have affected their profits. Ordinarily, you ain't going to find charging stations put in all these pilots unless pilot knows that they're going to be able to get some sort of a kickback on putting in a charging station. I'm going to say just a charging station alone, you're probably looking at least $50,000 if it's a decent charging station, because it's got to be able to adequately charge up battery after battery after battery. Now they have started making and designing something that I found to be very intriguing, which is panels on a car that are basically solar panels. But God only knows what a freaking bumper or a hood would cost or a fender would cost. But they're starting to make solar panels, which hopefully one day they can modify that to the point that they can bring the price way down. But it would be nice to know that you had an automobile that within the span of your life, as long as that automobile didn't get involved in a major accident, and I'm sure you got typical maintenance to have to do on the thing, but wouldn't it be nice to know that if you had an automobile that you never had to hook up to a charging station and you never had to uh, pull into a a petroleum gas station and fill up? Wouldn't it be nice to know that you had something that you could drive all your life if you desired to want to have that vehicle all your life and never have to spend a dollar on energy to make it run? Wouldn't it be nice to have something like that? And who's to say that they aren't going to do something like that in the future? But as of right now, we can't make nothing like that on a massive level as far as mass producing something like that. But it would be nice to think that one day our automobiles is going to be kind of like science fiction, to the point that as long as there's sun shining, you got you got energy to the point that you can roll. You can go to point A to point B, and it don't matter if it's on a short span or a long span. And you're not exhilarating a great deal of heat into the outer atmosphere, and you're not throwing carbon uh, gases into the atmosphere. Wouldn't it be nice to know that we could turn this around to where we didn't see these massive, massive weather patterns pertaining to to these phenomenons that are happening all over the world right now. We go from one extreme of the Mississippi River being so low, they're having to either slow down the barges or completely stop the barges because uh, they're only having to fill up the barges about half full. That way they don't go down into the water another 10, 15 foot. Um, I mean, they're having to make allowances right now for those that are going up and down the river, and it's slowing production down. And if it's forecast for it to even get lower, that's telling me that it could actually get worse. If you look at this statistic right here again, let's go back.
Space Africa.
Right. Hang on, he's gonna give a chart here in a minute. He's talking about this right here. You got a chart right here.
Now, there are currently 77 river gauges across the U.S. at or below their water threshold, but 40 of those river gauges lie along the Mississippi River. Don't believe me? Here is an example. Take the Mississippi River at Osceola in Arkansas. It is at record territory, negative 10.4 feet. That doesn't mean that the water is completely dried up in the river. It just means that based on historical averages, it's running about 10.4 feet below where it should be. And we're approaching record territory at the Mississippi River near Memphis, Tennessee as well, and it's projected to get lower. Climate Prediction Center calls for below average precipitation to continue over the Mississippi River Basin. And look at this, just incredible amounts of the state of Oklahoma and Arkansas under severe.
My son told me, because he's in the concrete business, that
get lower. Climate Prediction Center calls for below average precipitation to continue.
That here lately, they've been having orders coming in like from the Corps of Engineers and places like that towards wanting to expand their boat ramps into the Mississippi, because now that the water has become so low, now's the time. If you're going to expand that ramp, now's the time to do so, because you got commerce. It's constantly going in and out of the river. If it ain't nothing else but people that fishes for a living. I mean, I know people that go out on the river right over here at Tiptonville in a boat, and I don't know all the procedures towards what they do or how they do it, but I know this: whenever they come back at the end of the day, they got their boat almost half full or full of fish, to the point that that's how they make their living, by selling fish. I don't know if they net them. I don't know if they fish for them with rod and reels. I don't know if they're fishing with other types of means, but that's their living. They go out, they catch fish, they bring them back, they dress them, and then they sell them on the market. That's the reason why we have restaurants that has fish plates, has good fish. Well, if the river gets so low that you can't get in and out of the river unless you drive 100 miles one way or the other, sometimes those demands become obvious that, hey, you need to build your boat ramp on down a little bit lower. So because of it, there's been an extra order for concrete pumpers in doing this, because usually whenever they do something like that, it's usually formed out with concrete more so than asphalt. And there's just been an over demand right now towards trying to extend those boat ramps down into the lower levels of the water. When things get off balance, you have problems. And even the Bible talked about these days that would become unbalanced, to the point that even Christ himself said to flee into the mountains, to get out of the low-lying areas, because of these occurrences that was going to happen. Says very specifically to flee into the mountains whenever you shall see these things occurring. Why? Because the weather is going to become so abnormal. It talks about the sorrows in the Bible, that many, many sorrows would fall upon a society. And it's not just the sorrows pertaining to wars and diseases, but it's the sorrows pertaining to entirely too many people on the planet, entirely too many needs. And then if you'll combine that with the weather that's damaging the resources, either in flooding or fires or all the above, you got problems. You got sorrows. And it talks about these things in the Bible. To woe be unto the inhabitants whenever you shall physically, tangibly be able to see. Whenever you shall see these things occurring, the Bible says, woe, woe, woe be unto the inhabitants here upon to the planet whenever these things start to materialize. And now we're seeing them materialize. Which means what? Which means one thing, we're going to have to go back to the altar and get our lives right and quit playing games with our relationships with the Lord Jesus Christ. Number two, we're going to have to start treating one another better. Number three, we're going to have to start treating the earth better in the things that we're doing to the planet. And I guess number four would be improvising and the old standard ways that we used to build houses, or we used to do this or used to do that. We're going to have to change with the times. Just like the automobiles that I seen that had these panels that was built into the fiber of the very product that it was made from, to the point that it become like a solar panel bumper, a solar panel hood, a solar panel fender, a solar panel door panel, a solar panel deck lid. And I know that sounds bizarre, but if we're going to control all the resources that we are draining from the earth and what we are doing to the earth, we're going to have to make up and think up a whole lot of different ideals than what our ancestors did back years and years ago. I've said all along, in today's society, we have enough different products out there that you can literally build a house now, and put very, very little wood in. Very little wood. Um, they've got, panels that look like regular wood panels, but they're made out of carbon. They're made out of other types of products pertaining to your 4x8 sheets of plywood, or your 4x8 sheets of plaster rock that they put usually in homes. I mean, we're going to have to reinvent how we manufacture different things that we not only live in, but what we drive in and how we function in pertaining to a society, if we're going to be a surviving society. Because there's no doubt what we're doing to our planet right now is wreaking havoc upon the society. Like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, Australia was literally burning up. They had so many massive wildfires out there, and now they're having constant flooding. So it's shifting. And the way that it's shifting, it's not doing it on a gradual level, but it's doing it on a massive level, the way that it's shifting, going from one extreme to another. And if people can't understand that and see that, if they are still climate deniers in preaching that stuff, kind of like your presidential election deniers, if you cannot accept reality towards what reality is, then obviously you're the one with the problem, because you're the one that can't open up your eyes, either because you can't see the trees for the forest, or you just don't care about evolving the way that the rest of the world is evolving, if we're going to survive as a society upon this planet. There's no ifs, ands, buts, No question marks. It's unreal in how that we have seen things change drastically right here in the Western world just within the past 40 years. And 40 years ago, it was natural for this area here in Tennessee to have massive, massive winters to the degree that the highs, I think in 1982, that winter, um, there was a part where the high that day got up to like 17, 23 degrees, and the lows was hitting somewhere between 0 and 6 and 7 below. Well, whenever you have winters like that, if you have livestock, you got to go out and break the ice on the pond so that they'll have adequate water to drink, or you got to have some sort of a system set up with like heaters to where you have running water to where your animals can have water, because if they don't have water, they die. If everything is froze, you got to make allowances towards still being able to water your animals. 40 years ago, in 1982, you could walk out on a pond in Tennessee and wouldn't have to worry about busting through it. But since then, hardly ever now does it even film up on a pond, much less get thick enough to get on it and walk on it. Now there's places up north from here, 300 to 500 miles and further on up north, that they still have pretty abrupt winters, but their winters ain't near as harsh as what it was back years ago. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know that this country could afford a harsh winter. If we had winters like we had back in the 60s, whenever I can remember the winters, like whenever it froze the Dan Ryan around Chicago and killed about 30 or 40 people because they froze to death in their automobiles because it got so cold, like 60 below zero, the wind chill. I don't know that people would be able to survive that because of their finances. It requires a lot of money now to be able to heat a bigger home. A house that's any size at all, especially if you got a tough winter. Of course, running air conditioner in the summertime can be just about almost as expensive if you got a bigger home, and depending upon how hot it gets. Some of these air conditioners this year around here never did shut off. They run night and day and day and night and day, and they never did. I mean, they accelerated a little bit towards turning off and turning on because uh, the heat magnitude in the motor gets so hot, it's got a sensor on it that has to shut off. Uh, Fan still runs, but the compressor itself will shut off temporarily, because if it didn't, it gets so hot it just basically freeze up. It would melt down. It would seize. So obviously we're going to have to go through some major things in the next 10 years if we're going to be a survivalist society upon this planet. Major. Color content. How much is this motor resonating pertaining to putting out artificial heat? A light bulb. Are you still using your old standard 100, 120, 130 watt light bulbs, or have you alternated over to the new light bulbs that don't produce that type of heat and don't use up near as much energy? We're going to have to be conscientiously conservative if we're going to survive this, because right now we are in the middle of a storm, and I've never seen weather patterns become so abrupt as what they are today. And I mean, if you're caught up in the wrong place, kind of like the poor people in Waverly, Tennessee, down in a valley like that, or over in Kentucky, or in other places, it's just unbelievable towards the sorrows that these weather patterns can cause. And that's exactly what the Bible talks about. The climate crisis that we're experiencing right now is not just happening in America. It's happening all over the world in some form or fashion. And people need to wake up to that, and they need to start making adjustments to that. The old way of thinking is not going to make it in the future if we're going to be a survivalist Homo sapien society here upon the planet. Good luck to each and every one of us. God bless you. God bless America. God bless our troops. Want to say, these trying times that we're in right now, we can beat it, but it's going to take all of us to do it. It's going to take prayer, and it's going to take insight. It's going to take a supernatural movement of God working with the people here upon the planet towards redesigning, recreating, and reestablishing ourselves. Thank you. God bless, and shalom.